All right, 2 Corinthians 5:14. We're going to talk about kind of continue what we did last time, our behavior, our conduct, however you want to look at it. All right, in 2 Corinthians 5, verse 14, Paul says, "For the love of Christ constraineth us, because we thus judge, or discern, that if one died for all, then we're all dead." What does he mean by that he discerns that we discern?
That he feels the...
They can see it.
Okay, so if Paul discerns that one died for all, then when he sees that Christ died for all, the judgment he comes up with is then, oh, well then all were dead. Then is there any difference between all? No, that's the judgment he's making, that there's no difference. So verse 15, "And that he died for all," that's a fact, "that they which live should not henceforth live unto themselves, but unto him which died for them and rose again." And immediately somebody will take this and say, see, you got to quit sinning. And that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about serving the one that owns you. All right, now he says, verse 16, "Wherefore, having said that, henceforth know we no man after the flesh." Now, what in the world does he mean he doesn't know anybody after the flesh?
He doesn't know according to his lifestyle, his fleshly lifestyle.
That's right. Paul's not he's not out there searching, looking at people's lifestyles, telling them how they need to live. He's not concerned about whether they're Jew or Gentile. His mind's not on the flesh because he sees that Jesus Christ died for that. Then his mind's on serving the Lord, isn't it? So he says that we should live for him, live for him. And when he says that we need to live for him, basically what he means is verse 20. "Now then we are ambassadors for Christ." Okay, an ambassador has gone to work for someone, haven't they? Now back up to verse 16 again. "Wherefore henceforth know we no man after the flesh. Yea, though we have known Christ after the flesh, yet now henceforth know we him no more." If you think about the way most people are taught today in religion, what are they taught to look on and to judge?
The
The
flesh.
flesh. That's all they're concerned with. Even the nicest of people are concerned with their flesh, aren't they? If my focus every day is on cleaning up my flesh, and look, we ought to all watch how we act, but if my focus is on cleaning up the sin in my flesh, I ain't going to be an ambassador. I'm going to be a man trying to take care of sin, ain't I? All right, now it's not telling us that, hey, you need to run out and do all. That's not the idea at all. Now, to look at how this works, let's go back and look at what Paul said. Go to 1 Corinthians 15, verse 9. All right, in 1 Corinthians 15, I'm just going to draw, say, okay, here's Paul. I'm going to start out with Saul. Okay? Now, in 1 Corinthians 15:9, after being saved, after being called Paul, all right, 1 Corinthians 15:9, Paul says this. "For I am the least of the apostles, that am not meet to be called an apostle, because I persecuted the church of God." Okay? Hey, Dean. Welcome back.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to put a blue line here. We'll just do it this way. I got Saul over here, and then I'm going to call him Paul on this side, right? Now I know he's still Saul after he's saved now, but I want to talk about Saul as being unsaved Paul and Paul being saved Saul, okay? So he just said, after being saved here about, probably 15, 18 years when he writes this, he just said that he was the least of the apostles, right? Okay? The least of apostles. Well, how many does that make him the least of?
12.
A handful, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's saying, hey, I'm the least out of a handful of people. Okay, that's a low opinion of himself, but it's still pretty good opinion. I mean, if we consider it in ratios, right? Now, go over to Ephesians 3:8. Now, we're just going to do these how they appear in order in our Bible. Alexa, we might just have to give up on the first hour and
I'm trying to tell them on here.
Okay. All right, Ephesians 3:8, Paul says, "Unto me, who am less than the least of all saints." All right, now Paul, a little bit down the road, says he's the least of all saints. Well, what's happening to Paul's opinion of himself? It's getting lower. Being the least of the apostles is one thing, right? Now he said, years later, he says, hey, I'm the least of all saints. So I'm just going to draw Paul here a little smaller. Okay? Least of all saints. Now come over to 1 Timothy. Now the least of all saints is the least of a big old group of people, isn't it? Alright, in 1 Timothy 1 verse 15, Paul says, "This is a faithful saying and worthy of all acceptation, that Christ Jesus came into the world to save sinners, of whom I am chief." Now wait a minute. Over here at the end, Paul just called himself chief of sinners. Well, how many are sinners? Then over the course of these statements, what happened with Paul?
He's slowly going backwards.
Rather than doing what the religious world would tell you and I,
Yeah.
they would tell us that you're cleaning up and improving and getting better and better. What did Paul, our pattern, see about himself? That he's getting less and less. Why was Paul seeing himself less and less? Because who was being revealed unto him?
Christ.
Christ. So as Christ was revealed, Paul made the comparison we all ought to make, which is not with each other, which is to Christ. And what did Paul see?
That he wasn't even
He's
close.
nothing. As you see what Jesus Christ did and the things as you study the Word of God, we begin to think less and less of ourselves. Now that ain't what's being taught out there today.
No.
Y'all know good and well that's not the idea amongst religion. So when Paul says that he didn't consider things or knew no man after the flesh, basically Paul could include a lot of things in that, but was Paul judging his flesh against another man's flesh?
No.
Would that be an absolute waste of time?
Yeah.
Because what did Paul already say the flesh was? Dead. Then let it be dead. Now, go over to 2 Corinthians 5 again.
Sure.
Uh-huh.
On that diminishing,
Mm-hmm.
the object of the preposition changes completely. So that is the evidence that it is exactly what you just said, and that last one is not some exalted position. 'Cause I've heard Escalde say that that's an exalted leadership role. But he changed from apostles to saints to
Saints,
sinners.
yeah.
That seals it when you change the object of the preposition.
Okay, I didn't know what object of preposition was. I'm sorry. You got to speak for me and Chris. You know, we.
That's right.
Well,
You're exactly right. You're right.
This coming from a teacher over here.
Well, I mean, the preposition is of, the object is apostles, and then saints. And then
Oh, I
when
see what you're saying.
the whole object changed to sinners, that's not an exaltation. That means that I am nothing.
Yeah. He's steadily degrading him.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, I got it. Thanks.
He's an earthworm.
Yeah, you got it. Now, go back what he says in 2 Corinthians, right before where we started. In 2 Corinthians 5:12, Paul says, "For we commend not ourselves." If you commend yourselves, what are you doing?
Lifting yourself
You're
up.
reading your resume, right? Yeah, telling you exalted, hey, I've done this, I've done that. What if I told y'all, well, boy, I used to be a rotten person, then I got saved, and I quit doing this, and I quit doing that? Literally, what am I doing? I'm edifying and exalting myself. Should we quit doing all that? Yeah, we ought to. But if I make it my job to tell you what I've quit doing, now what's become the object of my ministry? My flesh. In other words, the things that we do or don't do, they don't even need to be talked about, do they? What do we need to spend our time talking about? The ministry of reconciliation. So he says, verse 12, "For we commend not ourselves again unto you, but give you occasion to glory on our behalf, that we might have somewhat to answer them which glory in appearance, and not in heart." There were some folks in Corinth here that were really reading their resume to these Corinthians. If you read the 2 letters to Corinthians, you get the idea somebody there is really tearing Paul down, aren't they? And in tearing Paul down, what are they doing? Trying to build themselves up, okay? So he says, let me find my verse here. Go over to chapter 10. chapter 10, verse 7, Paul tells them, do you look on things after the outward appearance? Well, what does religion do? That's what the proof of salvation to a religious-minded person, and I don't mean they're all lost. I don't know what they believe. That's between them and the Lord. But the proof that the Lord is operating in their life, they say is what? Cleaned up flesh, a better lifestyle. I quit this, I quit that. Is that proof of anything?
No.
Folks, I know some mighty religious folks. I mean super religious, and they don't believe Jesus Christ died for their sins. But boy, they live a lot better social lifestyle than I do. Okay, so he says in verse 7, do you look on things after the outward appearance? If any man trust to himself that he is Christ, let him of himself think this again, that as he is Christ, even so are we. Can you imagine what these Jewish type people would be saying about Paul? This guy, I mean, come on, this man's fleshly. I saw him eat a pork chop. He's staying at a Gentile's house. I mean, he even stayed with a woman over here, Lydia. He stayed in her house. Can't y'all imagine him saying that? Now he says, verse 8, for though I should boast somewhat more of our authority, which the Lord hath given us for edification, and not for your destruction, I should not be ashamed, that I may not seem as if I would terrify you by letters. For his letters, say they, whoever this is that's talking about him, are weighty and powerful, but his bodily presence is weak and his speech contemptible. They're saying, yeah, Paul writes a mean letter, but when he comes, look at him. He ain't nothing to look at. Little bitty old weak fellow. Now verse 11. Let such a one think this, that such as we are in word by letters, when we are absent, such will be indeed when we are present. For we dare not make ourselves of the number, or compare ourselves with some that commend themselves, they measuring themselves by themselves and comparing themselves among themselves are not wise. Now, basically, what's he saying right there?
When you're boasting about yourself.
Even if it's a godly behavior, if my focus is my behavior in relation to someone else's, am I glorifying the Lord or me? Now, do we need to watch our behavior?
Yes.
Yeah, just because we're ambassadors, right? I mean, if we do this thing the way religion does it, certain sins eliminate you from being able to be part of the group, right? What are we going to do? Run a background check on each other? I mean, seriously, do you know what I was doing last night? I don't know what you were doing. And somebody say, well, if you did, folks, all that's beside the point. What matters here is the edifying of the body of Christ. It's about Jesus Christ. So if it's about glorifying the Lord, then what happens to us the more we realize that? We become less and less significant, don't we? Okay. Now, with that in mind, let's go over to, I'm going to have to use my notes. Let's just look at this guy, Saul, or Paul. All right, go to Philippians 3. Now, I want y'all to just keep, in your mind, keep thinking about what religion says. How many times have y'all heard somebody say, "Whoo, boy, if you'd have knew me before I was saved, you wouldn't have liked me"? Y'all heard that, haven't you?
Recently.
And then they'll say, "But now," right? What they're doing is telling you how their behavior is proof of what a godly conversion they've had, that the Spirit's at work in their life, right?
Jesus took away their want to.
Yeah, I've heard that many times. I've heard many times that the Holy Spirit took away their desire to sin. What are they doing when they're saying that?
Lying.
They're lying, which is a sin. Their pride, which is the sin the Lord hates the most, it looks like, haughty spirit, right? All right. Look, again, somebody, I'll get questions saying, "You're saying it's okay." No, I'm telling y'all that our behavior is an end. No, how's that saying go? Means to an end? It's a means to an end. Do we need to watch how we behave?
Yeah.
But if we're going to set up something to judge ourselves by, then there's going to have to be a standard, right? What I'm going to prove to you today is that there is no standard, then there can't be anything to be judged by. There's only one thing you and I need to be motivated by, according to Paul over here, and when it comes to our ministry, and it's charity. This ought to be the motivating factor behind what we do. Not clean living, not cleaning up my flesh, not appearing before men as something. Now watch this man Paul, Philippians 3 verse 4. Now this is before he's saved, this is Saul. Though I might also have confidence in the flesh, if any other man thinketh he hath whereof he might trust in the flesh, I more. Circumcised the 8th day. Is that perfect?
Yeah.
Is there ever going to be a day in Paul's memory where he wasn't a Jew? No, folks, this guy from the eighth day, he's in it, okay? Circumcised the eighth day, of the stock of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of the Hebrews. Hey, this guy's the cream of the crop, isn't he? He says, as touching the law, a Pharisee. Now, a Pharisee not only said he was, a Jew, but this guy kept the ordinances, he kept everything, he kept traditions. I mean, they went so far beyond. This would be like today if I told somebody, I remember I'd asked a girl out when I was in high school, and her dad wouldn't let me go out with her. And I asked her, how come? And he told her I was from bad stock. Well, he's definitely right. I was from bad stock. But one of the reasons he gave is they were good Southern Baptists and we were Catholic. Don't you know, he told her, don't you know what those papists believe and that kind of thing? Look, hey, I agree with him. That's a bunch of foolishness. But what was that man basically saying?
Judging you.
He was judging me because he lived under a stricter denomination. That's what a Pharisee was, a stricter Jewish denomination. It's like the lady we talked about in Walmart looking at Lexi and shaking her head because she was in blue jeans, and that lady's got the Aunt Bee beehive hair and the long denim, that kind of thing, right? Now watch. Concerning zeal, persecuting the church. Can you think of anybody that was more zealous for their religion than Saul? He says, touching the righteousness which is in the law, blameless. Now did the man just say he was blameless according to the law? He didn't say he was sinless, he was blameless. What's he say?
He
did every sacrifice, he made every ordinance, he kept every feast day. He did exactly what his religion prescribed, right? He says, but what things were gained to me, those I counted loss for Christ. How were all those things we just read gained to Paul?
Because he got status,
About him.
money,
You got it.
power.
Let's take little Saul back here, okay? Here's Saul at 8 days old. Now I know he grew physically, right? But as Saul is in this religious system, how is Saul getting? Folks, he's getting bigger and bigger. Old Saul is a chief man among the people, isn't he?
Right.
Is old Saul shining out like a bright light in front of the Jewish folks? He is. And what is it that makes it possible for him to have this public perception?
He persecuted
His persecution of the church proved his zealotness. But was it what was in between his ears or what he showed to the public world? Then what really made the difference between Paul was living according to a standard. It's works. And think about what the standard was Paul was measuring himself by. It was by the ordinances. I mean, seriously. Paul couldn't say, I covet less than anybody. You can't see that. Paul just told us he was blameless under the law. What Paul's telling you there is that he kept his religion better than anybody, right? So then what was the standard, folks? A standard, if you're going to judge flesh, you got to be able to see it, don't you? And what do they judge by?
by his word.
By his word, his ordinances. What are the so-called Christian ordinances today?
Same.
You say baptism and Lord's Supper, sure, but they go far beyond that.
Oh, yeah.
Depending on what type or what flavor you're around, the ordinances are different, aren't they? That lady that was looking at Lexi with such disgust, was it not an ordinance that was making her feel elevated? It was a dress code, wasn't it? How about the one that looks at some guy and he sees some guy that's, I don't care what it is, doing something. You've got to physically do it in order for it to be judged, right? So then there's always this standard. Paul's standard was the ordinances of the law. The standard today that men use is just the Christian ordinances, and they're steadily evolving. They're always making new ones and inventing new ones. I'm going to prove to y'all that there is no standard in God's eyes. Now, if I go off today and I marry me a 14-year-old girl, what will the public say about me?
Pervert.
Oh, I'm, hey, pervert? Somebody called me a pervert. Chris just called me a pervert. I said, yeah.
I know you.
Like the guy said, he said, he's a pervert. He says, no, he's not. He said, how you know? He said, because I'm one and he's never at the meetings. But But if you married a 14-year-old girl today, based on social standards today, you'd be labeled a pervert. My granny got married when she was 14. Nobody called her a pervert. My grandpa treated her great. I loved both of them. They had a wonderful family. What's the difference?
Well, the difference
Fine.
then
The
is
time-
it was accepted.
The time changed. Does God have some standard He changes based on time?
No.
Then whose standard changed?
Man's.
But you tell that, go in a Southern Baptist church today and tell them you're going to marry a 14-year-old, you better look out. They'll put you out of it, won't they? All right. Now, how about if I were to go to Saudi Arabia today? I'd marry me a 14-year-old.
10 of them.
10, yeah. Seriously, I mean, ain't that, it's just different, right? So then is there a set standard to go by?
No.
What's the proof that there is no standard in the dispensation of grace?
Well, Paul said all things were lawful.
Yeah. And Paul also said he became all things to all men, right? So if Paul was wanting to preach to a Saudi Arabian with a 14-year-old wife, would Paul go in there and condemn him about his wife?
No.
Paul wasn't focused on his flesh. Paul wanted that man to see Jesus Christ, right?
Right.
What if Paul then turned around and went somewhere where if Paul had a 14-year-old wife, would he bring her to a Southern Baptist convention?
No.
No. See, so it's a thing like that. Now let's just look at this guy Saul again. Go to Galatians 1. All right, in Galatians 1, see if Saul was respected by his peers. When Saul went in, or Paul, went in and ate with Gentiles and preached to Gentiles and did the things he did, what did he give up?
He gave up satisfying himself.
You got it. He gave up his ability or his desire to glory in his flesh before his Jewish peers, didn't he? Did Paul sacrifice himself in sort of a way in order to preach to those Gentiles?
Yeah.
He sure did, didn't he? All right, in Galatians 1, verse 13, Paul says, "You have heard of my conversation." And that word, tell you what, let's just read that word real quick. The word's not exactly like you and I would think. Today I think of language when I think of conversation, don't y'all? All right, I'm going to read it to you. Webster's 1828. General course of manners, behavior, deportment, especially as it respects morals. And it goes on, and it can involve language and all, but conversation in general is just behavior or conduct. Now he says, "You have heard of my conversation in time past in the Jews' religion." Why does he call it the Jews' religion? It wasn't God's, you got it. The Jews' religion. Well, if it's the Jews' religion, then who invented it? The Jews did. Now he says, "And the Jews' religion, how that beyond measure I persecuted the church of God and wasted it, and profited in the Jews' religion." Here's how all those things were to his gain. "I profited in the Jews' religion above many my equals in my own nation, being more exceedingly zealous of the traditions of my fathers." Folks, was Paul surpassing his peers?
Yeah.
It's like however many was in his graduating class, Paul was outrunning them, wasn't he? Okay? Now this is all in his religion. So his religion was raising Paul up. Go to Acts 22.
So today, if I make the biggest picket signs and have the largest picket group, then I can be lifted up in my
Exactly. Exactly. Or if you dress the best, or if you talk the cleanest, or, you know, that guy one time told me some folks got on him for saying piss. He said he had to take a piss and said they all got on him about it. Folks, piss is in the Bible. That's what God calls it.
So is ass.
Yeah. But they said, "Oh, no, you've got to TT." Huh? I mean, where's that come from? That's some new social thing, isn't it? Y'all know that's always evolving junk, isn't it? Okay? Now, he says in Acts 22, verse 1, he's talking to the Jews. He said, "Men, brethren, and fathers, hear you my defense, which I now make unto you." When they heard that he spoke in the Hebrew tongue, that's your Hebrew of Hebrews, they kept the more silence, and he saith, "I am verily a man which am a Jew, born in Tarsus, a city in Cilicia, yet," notice the yet. He doesn't say and, he says yet. "Did a Hebrew Jew from Jerusalem look down his nose on a Greek Jew born out among the people. Yeah, so watch what Paul says. Yeah, I'm born in Tarsus. I'm a Grecian, a city in Cilicia, yet brought up in this city at the feet of Gamaliel. You know, that's like somebody today saying they went to Harvard for a Jew back then. This is the most esteemed teacher among the people. Paul said, yeah, I'm a Jew and I was born outside the land. However, my old man sent me back here as a boy and I've been trained. I'm the cream of the crop. He says, brought up in this city at the feet of Gamaliel and taught according to the perfect manner of the law of the fathers and was zealous towards God as ye all are this day. Was this man, folks, he was a big wheel in the church, wasn't he? He says, I persecuted this way unto death, binding and delivering into prison both men and women, as also the high priest doth bear me witness, and all the state of the elders. Basically, did he just say that the high priest knew him and remembered him?
Yeah.
Folks, was Paul just a run-of-the-mill Jew if he was known of the high priest? No, this guy was a big wheel. I always think about him like a Kennedy. Y'all know, I laughed, I was telling Lexi a poem the other day about Teddy Kennedy. I'll have to tell y'all after, but Teddy Kennedy was going to be the next president. I mean, come on, folks. Well, I say either he was going to be the next president or the same people would have killed him before they let him be. But Teddy Kennedy fixed his own boat, didn't he?
He did.
Yeah. What was Teddy Kennedy I mean, he was heading to the top, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Right? Same thing. That's how you could see Paul in the Jews' religion. This guy was a big wheel, right? Now go to chapter 23. In chapter 23, verse 6, Paul says, but when Paul perceived that the one part were Sadducees and the other Pharisees, he cried out in the council, men and brethren, I am a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee. Now wait a minute, he's reading his pedigree, isn't he?
Yeah.
Is Paul a first generation Pharisee? Oh, at least second, isn't he? What does that say about him?
He's established.
He's established, he's from a family, you know, y'all ever heard anybody say, a guy told me one time, I asked him if he was saved, and I kid y'all not, he said, yep, there's been a such and such, his last name, there's been a such and such in First Baptist Church for 108 years.
Oh, I've heard that before too.
Seriously. And my great-granddad was the founding, y'all heard that stuff, hadn't you?
Yeah.
What's that got to do with anything?
No.
But does that have something to do with that denomination?
Yep.
Okay. That's this man right here. This is him before salvation. Okay, let's look at one more. Go to 26. (26:4). Paul again is talking to Agrippa, and he's telling him these things. He says, verse 4, my manner of life from my youth, which was at the first among mine own nation at Jerusalem, know all the Jews, which knew me from the beginning, if they would testify that after the most straightest sect of our religion I lived a Pharisee. Now I know what a Pharisee is. It's the strictest sect. What do you and I call a sect today? A cult or a denomination, don't we? Was Paul part of the strictest denomination?
Yeah.
Okay. Then in the eyes of the people back here, during this period of time, back here, old Saul is magnified more and more until we get right here, and Saul is the shining example of what Judaism was looking to produce. That's the fruit they produced, right? And what did Paul say he did with the whole shooting match? He counted it but dung. If Ralph was here, he'd tell us what dung was, wouldn't he? Real loud. Dung. Alright, so then, if Paul was this great shining example back during this time, when Paul got saved, we just read what happened to Paul. Things reversed course, didn't they? Did Paul immediately see how? No, people will say that today, but not according to the Scripture. Immediately, Paul's first thought after trusting the Lord that he was the Christ, he said, I'm going to keep the law now. And he found out more and more what a failure he was, didn't he? Have you found that out about yourself? How many new leaves y'all flipped over? Boy, I flipped over so many. And finally, what do? Just cut that tree down. Just forget about it, right? Okay, now, let's go look at what Paul himself says about this situation. Go to Ephesians 2. Now, all we got to do is just believe what Paul says here. All right, in Ephesians 2:1. says, and you, and that's a bunch of Gentiles, hath he quickened who were dead in trespasses and sins. All right, what were these Ephesian Gentiles? A bunch of dead pagans, right? Diana worshippers and whatever. Now verse 2. Wherein in time past ye, these Ephesians, walked according to the course of this world. Well, if it's the course, and remember, it's like a race course. If you walked according to the course of this world. Now, why does he use the word like a race course?
Direction.
It's a direction, and when people are in a race, what are they doing with each other? Competing. What's religion? It's competing. Each denomination sets a standard, and it involves these physical things, and the people within it begin immediately to start competing, don't they? I one time bought a air condition for the church we were part of. They had a room in there that didn't have anything. I bought an air condition, and I mean, I was sitting over there on the second row. You know, I'm air conditioned. Guess what the guy sitting in front of me did the next week? He brought in a refrigerator. Seriously. What in the world they need a refrigerator for in a church? They didn't. What did he bring a refrigerator for?
Outdo you.
He outdid me. When he brought that refrigerator in, I was, what? Yeah, y'all see what I mean?
Yeah.
All right, so Paul says here that he was on the course of this world. He was in a competition, so to speak. He had a manner of life that was a competition. He says, according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air. Who is that?
Satan.
Is Satan ignorant of our nature?
No.
All Satan has to do, folks, is set one against another. Is it to set one against another in hatred? Nope.
No.
It's in competition, envy, and strife. What's the thing that always comes along with this in the Bible? Contending, striving. So he says, according to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that now worketh in the children of disobedience. So these Gentiles he's talking to, had they been serving in Satan's system? Absolutely, right? Now watch verse 3. Among whom also we all. Would that include Paul?
Yeah.
Among whom also we all had our conversation in times past in the lust of our flesh, fulfilling the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature the children of wrath, even as others. Now y'all, please think about this. Is Paul talking about something he did over here or back here?
Back here.
From his youth, did he live among the strictest sect?
Yeah.
What did he just say about it?
And then it was-
Y'all see it?
Yeah.
Folks, people who make you believe that this is drinking, smoking, and gambling. Watch it, verse 3. Among whom also we all had our conversation in times past in the lusts of our flesh. I guarantee you, folks, Paul wasn't in brothels back here. No way. Now, I might have found Paul in a brothel over here. I'm not saying he did, but I would find him one over here if I'd find him here, wouldn't I?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Why?
preaching the word.
Yeah, because Paul be preaching the word to people, right? Another thing that might would happen, did Paul eat pork chops back here?
Oh,
No.
no.
He ate them over here.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Folks, when Paul was involved in this, what did he say this was all about? The lust of the flesh. What was Paul's flesh lusting after?
Power.
Power and glory. Okay, now watch what he says. Times pass in the lust of our flesh, fulfilling the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature the children of wrath. Now he's a child of wrath when he's in this system. What did Paul love his fellow brother Pharisees? No, folks, he was competing with them. Seriously, he was, if Wayne was here, we always joke about, man, I seen some fights in Sunday school class in the Baptist church like you couldn't believe. This thing, it looked like Ali and Lewis. It was, what were they doing?
Convening.
Can I ask you a question
Yeah.
about verse 2? I'm trying to see if this is what I'm seeing.
Okay.
I know that he said that the Ephesians were without God, alien from the covenants of promise and all that stuff, so they were just without God.
Yeah.
So in verse 2, is he going back and tying all the people who were the inheritance, Israel to the rest of everybody else?
Yep. That's exactly what he's
So
doing.
the children of this, that now worketh in the children of disobedience, that would be Israel,
It's
right?
Israel.
So he's tying it all together and saying that no difference in
No
the
difference.
condition.
You got it. The only difference between, all right, I'm gonna put the Gentiles over here. We'll say, Diana pagans, right? And whatever they were. But were they striving to compete with each other in the Diana religion? And what did he just say about the Jews' religion? No different. Okay? The Jews' religion was just the same. What was the only difference between the two? The standard, the ordinances. Did Paul just say that this thing back here was just as rotten and corrupt as this over here? He did. Okay? Now, why would Paul say that? What are both of them to the glory of? That man or not God, right? Okay. All right. Now go over. Let's see if we can verify this. Go to Titus 3. Titus 3, we just read from verse 1. Paul says, put them in mind to be subject to principalities and powers, to obey magistrates, to be ready to every good work, to speak evil of no man, to be no brawlers, but gentle, showing all meekness unto all men. You know, that brings to mind something. In these letters, Paul talks about what a bishop and what a man that's going to serve and what his conditions need to be. And one of the things is it says having one wife, husband of one wife. And people say, well, anybody that's divorced can't preach the word. Did he say having been the husband of one wife?
No.
What's the proof of that? He also said not a brawler. Had Paul been a brawler? If this is based at, look, what everybody wants to do is they want to make religious service be about your flesh, your moral, and your character, and that's what qualifies you to serve. Who did God pick to bring this message to us? Seriously.
Biggest sinner of all.
If it was a history of good moral behavior, he couldn't have picked Paul, could he?
Oh, no.
What he means by the husband of one wife. Folks, if a man's going to go, for instance, Paul, can you imagine the Philippians are helping Paul? Paul said he accepted help from the Philippians to preach the gospel. They helped him, didn't he? He wouldn't accept help from the Corinthians. Why not? The Corinthians were carnal in that, so he didn't, right? All right, he's accepting help from the Philippians. Can you imagine a Philippian giving Paul some food or some money to spread the gospel and Paul's got a harem traveling with him? I mean, seriously, that's what you're talking about, isn't it? All right, so what he's saying here is don't let your behavior be something people can dispute the gospel over, right? Now he says here, verse 2, to speak evil of no man. Boy, everybody loves to jump on divorce, but they don't like to talk about that one, do they? Y'all ever met anybody that never spoke evil of anyone?
No.
But is it a good idea to continue to speak evil about a person if you want to? No. What do we need to do? We need to just let that rest aside. But are you apt to speak evil of someone?
Yeah. Sure.
Y'all know our nature. Now he says to speak evil of no man, to be no brawlers, but gentle, showing all meekness unto all men. Now verse 3. For we ourselves, would that include Paul? Mm-hmm. We ourselves also were sometimes foolish. When was Paul foolish? Right here. We also were foolish, disobedient. What? Do y'all know when Paul was the most disobedient in his life? When he was the most obedient to the law.
Yeah.
Why? Who was that to the glory of?
To man.
Man.
What did God give them the law for?
Show them they can do it.
To create this.
Yeah.
He gave them the law to show them their complete inadequacy. And what did they do with the law? They lifted themselves up. Okay? He says foolish, disobedient, deceived. How was Paul deceived? He just told us how he lived so great under the law, hadn't he? You just hear Fee shut that door trying to open. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Deceived, serving diverse lusts and pleasures. I want to ask y'all this again. Do y'all really believe Paul is talking about back here how fleshly and womanizing and drunk? No. What was his goal back here? To glorify his flesh. What's his goal over here?
Glorify God.
Glorify God. Glorify the work of the Lord. Now over here, the only way his behavior enters into it is Paul knows based on who he's trying to preach to, he better watch his behavior. Is there a standard? Is there a set law that goes by? No. Folks, if there's a standard, then men start competing, don't they? Okay, now he says, serving diverse lusts and pleasures, living in malice and envy. What's envy?
Being jealous.
Jealousy. Was Paul jealous of the Gentiles back here?
No.
Who had Paul been jealous of back here?
Jews.
His fellow Jews. Okay, envy, hateful, and hating one another. Now, that don't sound like much of a character that's morality is going to make him be approved.
She
What in the world
walks
is she
out.
doing? Does it sound like Jesus Christ picked Paul based on his past performance?
No,
All right, then why did Jesus Christ pick Paul?
he saw that he could use him, that he would believe his word and convert over and be able to spread it to the other people.
He certainly knew he was going to believe. Jesus saw what was going to become of Paul.
It's always hard.
But in the eyes of the public, what did they see when they looked at Saul?
Right.
Saul would not be able
Like
to
a pope.
glory.
Yeah.
You got it. Okay. Now come on over to back over to 1 Timothy, chapter 1. What's she doing?
Trying to get out.
What'd you do, knock her in the head?
Put her out.
All right. 1 Timothy chapter 1. Let's just read from verse 3. Paul says, as I besought thee, Timothy, to abide still at Ephesus when I went into Macedonia. By the way, this is one of the verses you can use to prove that Ephesians is written later. He says that thou mayest charge some that they teach no other doctrine, neither give heed to fables and endless genealogies. What group of people in Timothy's day would have been interested in genealogies? The Jews, okay? And genealogies, which minister questions rather than godly edifying, which is in faith. So do. In other words, don't focus on flesh. A genealogy tells you about the condition or the character of the flesh, doesn't it? Why did Paul just tell us he was the son of a Pharisee? To show you what a great, strict Pharisee he was. Now he says, verse 5, now the end of the commandment is charity out of a pure heart, and of a good conscience, and of faith unfeigned. Then what ought to be the intent and the motivation behind the things we do? Charity, right? Verse 6, from which some, having swerved, have turned aside unto vain jangling. Now what are they going back to? Competing and contending. Okay, verse 7, desiring to be teachers of the law, understanding neither what they say nor whereof they affirm. Folks, they're using the law unlawfully. What's the only lawful way to use the law?
To bring a man to the end of himself.
That's right, to let a man see what he is, how ungodly and unrighteous he is. Verse 8, but we know that the law is good if a man use it lawfully. Now what in the world we just say the law was for? To show a man how, okay, now watch what he says here. Knowing this, that the law is not made for the righteous man. What did the Jew think? He thought the law was made for them for their righteousness. Watch what he says who the law is for. But the lawless and disobedient, you don't need to give somebody that's a lawkeeper law. They're a lawkeeper already, aren't they? For the lawless and disobedient, for the ungodly, for sinners, for unholy, profane, for murderers of fathers, murderers of mothers, for manslayers, for whoremongers, for them that defile themselves with mankind, for men stealers, for liars, for perjurers persons, and if there be any other thing that is contrary to sound doctrine. What in the world was the law for?
To glorify
For
him.
that-
Mainly for the man who will put himself outside of this list.
You got it. Anybody, that's perfect, George. I keep forgetting I'm supposed to repeat. George said the law's for the man that would not see himself under that list. The law's to show us that's the list of me and you. That's what my flesh is. So then why would I take the law that's given to condemn my flesh and twist it around and use it to glorify the flesh? What did Isaiah say? He said they'll call good evil and evil good. Now what's going on today?
Same thing.
They've taken Moses' law, the standards and practices, and they've just brought over those. And over here today, they've got the Christian standard. Now, Is there a set standard? Nope, it's always evolving, isn't it? That's proof that it ain't from God.
It depends on which church you go to.
Which church you go to or which age you live
Which age
in,
you
right?
live in, right.
If this standard is always changing, adjusting, and evolving, can it be from God's? No, folks, it ain't. So think about this. What's acceptable today in 10 years from now, all right, if I go in a bathroom, wherever I'm at, and a lady comes in the bathroom, hey, that's a problem for
Yeah.
me. Okay? But if I go out and say that publicly, they'll label me being some kind of hateful, whatever. So what's happening? Everything's evolving, it's changing, isn't it? Now, I shouldn't say it'd be a problem if she was an ugly lady, right?
But isn't it strange how nobody ever heard any problems with that when there wasn't a law? And then the minute they made it into some kind of law, then now they have all of these different problems.
It is. It's just proof of what Paul
They ought to
said.
make them all unisex bathrooms like they do at the doctor's offices.
Well, Paul
Everybody
said,
should use the bathroom at home.
That's what they got in Asheville,
Before
the
you
hippie
go.
town,
yeah.
unisex.
Well, Paul said that he had not known lust, except the law said, "Thou shalt not covet." Until they started talking about bathrooms, nobody cared nothing about bathrooms.
That's right.
Okay? It's just a big. Just forget about all of that. Folks, if I go somewhere and I want to preach the gospel to a person, and they insist they got a right to use any bathroom they ought to, do I need to argue with them?
No.
That's a bunch of ridiculous
Yeah.
foolishness. Just let them exalt all that crap, then tell them, well, you know what? I thank God I ain't got to worry about that. Jesus Christ died for my sins, and I'm looking to leave this earth.
Yeah.
I'm not looking to exalt my sexual preference. I'm looking to get out of here,
That's
right?
right.
Okay. Now he says here in 1 Timothy, verse 10 or verse 11. The doctrine according to the glorious gospel of the blessed God which was committed to my trust. Now notice he says, we need to go back to the last part of verse 10, all those things, and if there be any other thing that is contrary to sound doctrine according to the glorious gospel of the blessed God which was committed to my trust. What does the gospel that was committed to Paul say? Jesus Christ died for my sin. Then guess what? Any doctrine that comes along that is flesh-oriented is contrary to that. Okay? Is there anything that a person could do today that would eliminate them from the work of Jesus Christ for their sins? Did Jesus Christ die for that person's sins?
Yeah.
I don't care what it is they're doing. Now, is the thing they're doing, can it hurt their ability to be an ambassador? Sure. Based on the time, right? It might, the thing they're doing today that would offend might not offend tomorrow. But anyway, so he says, verse 12, I thank Christ Jesus our Lord who hath enabled me. Did Jesus pick Paul because he was able, or did he enable him?
He enabled him.
What was the thing that had to happen with Paul to be enabled?
He had to believe in the word of the Lord.
He's got to believe, and what's he going to have to see?
See himself.
He got to
Can't
see
do it.
himself. He got to see himself for what he is,
Yeah.
right? Okay. All right, let's take a break and then we'll do another part.